This early view of the Menomonee Valley looks southeast from 30th and Park Hill about 1885. The railroad was already a major industry in the valley, and by the early 1900s it was the city's largest employer. The valley still has a lot of industry and about 7,000 workers. That's well below the 50,000 who once worked here, but the valley may now be receiving as much attention as it did when the railroad and other businesses began to develop the major industrial center.
This valley is a jewel in a city, an untapped, unused jewel in a great city like Milwaukee, and I think it has a great future.
These are just some of the 50 members of the Menomonee Valley Business Association. They help the city and Sewerage District pay for the $80,000 market study and land use plan. In many ways, they represent the kinds of mixed-use developments planned for the valley.
The involvement of the association is good in the sense that things can be done in a comprehensive way, and that the members of the association will have a voice in the development that takes place in the community, or in the valley I should say, rather than be the result of the development that takes place in the valley. I would think the upcoming development would be development that would be warehouse type light industrial development. However, the companies that are in the valley, I think, should be able to go on.
The Menomonee Valley area is roughly 1,500 acres of land between Wisconsin Avenue on the north and National Avenue on the south, Highway 41 and Miller Park on the west, and the Milwaukee River on the east. Much of the area is composed of what are called brownfields, lands contaminated from previous businesses. Cleanup costs of some of the long vacant, environmentally contaminated properties has played a major role in discouraging new development. The problem now is being attacked in many ways. The Milwaukee Economic Development Corporation, with elected officials and members of the private sector, works to attract businesses and jobs to the city and is an active participant in valley redevelopment.
MEDC has been a participant in the process of examining the environmental conditions of the valley, feeling being that the first thing that we had to do if we want to see the valley develop is to identify the extent of the environmental problems of the valley, and number two, participate in a long-range plan in terms of what would be needed for the valley and who would be the best potential users of the valley. So MEDC has been involved in both of those programs. The long-range study has been completed. The environmental aspect of the study is moving from the first phase to the second phase. And that's very important because I don't think anybody will move into the valley without knowing to some extent what the liabilities of that land is.
The MEDC chairman, also chief financial officer for Marshall and Ilsley Corporation, says he's had a long-term interest in the valley.
It really is a blight on the city, and it's a poor introduction to the city. That's one part, but the other one has to deal both with involvement here at the bank, but also at MEDC, that I see companies expanding and building further and further from the city. And as such, the jobs are going further and further from the city. And when one looks at how many people live in such close proximity to the valley, and yet there are so few jobs in the valley. And I'm sure that private industry, if the conditions were correct, would be very attracted to that supply of labor. So it would work both to the betterment of the city as a whole and to the people who live very close to the valley, both on the north side and on the south side.
In addition to MEDC's efforts on brownfield cleanup, the Environmental Protection Agency recently awarded 3 different $200,000 grants to the Department of City Development to analyze groundwater pollution problems, the Milwaukee Community Service Corps to train young adults to identify and clean up environmentally contaminated sites, the 16th Street Community Health Center to focus on strategies for cleaning up and marketing the new redevelopment opportunities.
We are the primary healthcare provider on the near south side of Milwaukee, and people say, well, why are you guys involved in brownfield redevelopment? And frankly, the angle for us is that if we can get more good family supporting jobs within the neighborhood that are accessible and actually where residents of the near south side are employed and they have these good incomes, then we think there's a direct correlation. We know there's a direct correlation between better health and income. And what it will really mean for many of the employers who are searching for employees right now out in the urban fringe is that they have a ready-made workforce right here on the near north side, near south side of Milwaukee. It's so accessible, where people could literally walk to work as their ancestors used to do.
The market study and land use plan for the Menomonee Valley, adopted by the Common Council and Mayor, focuses on 4 priority development sites. The 106-acre former Milwaukee Road Railroad Shop site, just east of the new ballpark, where the redevelopment plan envisions manufacturing, light industrial, warehouse, and office developments. The Milwaukee Road Reed Street yards, just east of the 6th Street Viaduct, for light industrial, warehouse, and office development. Properties along West Canal Street, just east of Ember Lane, that have industrial redevelopment potential. And properties near 6th and Canal that the plan envisions for light industrial, warehouse, or office developments.
I think in the final analysis, it will be developed by the private sector. That's where the capital really should come from. And if you have to force it too much, it says maybe this is not a good idea. On the other hand, I think that the public sector, in terms of dealing with the problems that exist there today, that would be appropriate. So one, there's a certain amount of infrastructure in terms of utilities and access by way of surface transportation that is quite properly, I think, the role of the municipal side. The issue of dealing with the environmental or the contamination, that I think is a joint effort, but clearly in terms of having some constraint on the maximum amount of liability that a developer would have. I think that has to be the public sector, and probably has to be the cost of remediating that land will have to fall on the public sector. Hopefully we will get both state and federal monies to help in that regard.
Asking for that financial help was a priority matter at this meeting in June. It marked the first time that representatives of the city, county, state, and federal governments got together to focus on the redevelopment potential of the valley. The mayor says it has a lot to offer.
We have existing buildings and infrastructure in the valley and businesses in the valley that have shown that you can make money, that you can have a strong business, that you can do well in the Menomonee Valley. The neighborhoods on both sides of the valley are starting to understand that they're next to the valley, that it's actually there, and that it has the potential to be beautiful. And it also has the potential to be the fertile ground for many, many more jobs than we already have in the valley. And what I would like to see as we go through the next 10 years or so is a doubling of the number of workers that are in the valley. And I'd like to see this happen consistent with having the bicycle and natural corridor that's going through the valley, which I think businesses will find useful. Some of their employees might even use it. And the combination of good environmental practice and strong business conditions, like being in the center of the labor market, will come together and create prosperity.
Redevelopment of the valley could counteract the trend of development in farmlands north and west of Milwaukee. This sprawl development pattern has resulted in both environmental problems and serious mismatch of jobs and available workers. And the valley provides a significant opportunity for us to deal with this on a regional basis. There's an extensive infrastructure in place in the valley, including sewer, water, transportation, and power. Water by way of river, canal, and lake, railroad offering passenger and commercial, highways, and to some degree, opportunities for recreational use of water.
Technical and financial assistance from the state and federal governments is crucial to the effort to clean up and redevelop the valley, and the city got some positive feedback.
We realize there's more to brownfields than just cleanup of contaminated sites. Certainly that could be a potential developmental problem, but there's other things that certainly affect redevelopment. Outdated infrastructure, crime, substandard housing, untrained workforces, and transportation problems certainly complicate redevelopment. And we have become more sensitive to that to those problems.
There's a lot of resources being put into sustainable development in brownfields, and I think this is an opportunity for us to seize the day, to direct our resources at the Menomonee Valley, and I think that's something that we can do quite well here. And I thank everybody for coming here, and I think the state is committed to assisting the city not only on the valley but other projects as well, and learning from our experience.
The valley will be redeveloped and will not only have recreational uses consistent with its geography, but also the type of development that we're planning for the valley will be sustainable development that will link people in the area proximate to the valley with all sorts of opportunities. And that will be sustainable. It won't be like the development on the edge of town that is dependent on automobiles and low gas prices. This will be sustainable development for the heart of the city.
Those discussions were really quite fruitful. Now we just have to move it forward. And I think with what is going on right now in the state budget is even more of an indication, at least on the state level, of how important this is to the governor and to the legislature, where they're actually earmarking money for redevelopment activities here in the valley to be matched by the city and by the private sector.
Many things are already happening to make the valley more appealing, including Miller Park on the western boundary. The first leg of the Hank Aaron State Park bike trail has been developed along the south shore of the Menomonee River. Impact Foods has shown how green space can make the valley more attractive with its unusual sculpture site along Canal Street. Replacement of the outdated 6th Street Viaduct is among the extensive road improvements that will be needed to improve street access to the land slated for development. This artist's conception shows what is called a cable stay design. The cables support the sloping spans of 2 bridges, which will slope downward from either end of the valley. With provisions for water and rail traffic, the 4-lane roadways will meet in the middle at Canal Street.
It will ultimately, as I said, it will be a gateway to the west, and it will ultimately call for the extension of Canal Street, which will eventually give you new access from the west and open the valley up and make it part of a living city.
Because of the vast size of the project, implementation will require proactive efforts of both the public and private sectors. The Menomonee Valley Business Association is working to form a business improvement district to remain involved in the redevelopment.
The creation of the bid creates the seed money, and there are monies on the table that will complement that money, and I think it's a spark that starts the fire. I think the assessment involved in a bid is nominal, and it causes all the businesses to be on board, you know, and that's the spark that starts the fire.
The public-private Milwaukee Economic Development Corporation is ready to take on additional financial roles in the development.
Clearly they cannot finance it entirely by themselves, but if they can be part of the overall solution, if you will, if they can bridge the gap between other sources of funds in order to get the project going.
And city officials continue extensive environmental cleanup efforts and to seek the funding and technical resource help they'll need from the state and federal governments. Success in this effort would strengthen the neighborhood and the city.
You now have a tax-paying entity located down in the center of the city. Number 2, the whole city would benefit in the sense that I think the image of the city would rise measurably. Third, if we can have the jobs there serving the people on either side of the valley, the neighborhoods on either side of the valley, there'll be a second round of development, I think, that come from employment and income. So it would really be a triple-barreled effect.
With more children living in proximity of it, north and south, than any other river in the state, and we don't have a connection to it. And with more workers available than any other place in the state, north and south, more workers per square mile, we haven't really taken full advantage of it. But we have the opportunity to do it. And I think if everybody works at it, if everybody looks at it as a way to add value to the economy and add value to citizens' lives, I think we can make something that will take full advantage of the valley, that will create a situation where we will not waste any person, waste any place, waste any opportunity.
Visitors to Summerfest were among the first to view Milwaukee's new mounted patrol. Prior to this year, it was primarily a ceremonial patrol in parades and special events. Now it's a full-time unit. But getting to this point involved more than just saddling up. For the last several months, 4 officers, a supervisor, and several alternates have been training for this specialized police unit. Rider and horse learning what's required and why they are important.
I think it gives people a sense of security. The officers on a horse are very visible, they're very high, but in conjunction with that, the officers can see a lot more from their vantage point. When you're sitting on a horse, you're probably about 10 feet in the air, and you can see above the traffic, you can see above the crowd, and probably the biggest advantage again is that the crowd can see you.
Hey, Rock, Laser 103, laying down some Nirvana, getting ready to whip out some Creed.
More than a dozen horses were tested before the finalists were chosen to see if they would be able to deal with the things they'll run into on the job. Flashing police lights, the exhaust they'll encounter on a city street, noises unique to an urban area, the flickering light and smells of police flares, and obstacles of many kinds.
We try to simulate as much as we can. Obviously, we can't simulate everything, but we put a lot of things in the ground. Horses are very wary of everything things above their head or things on the ground below them. It's one or the other. So what we try to do is put a lot of things on the ground so that they're not so worried about stepping on things or stepping over things or stepping on platforms or working through barricades or cones or getting near vehicles. Anything that we think that they may have to encounter, we get them very used to it. We also get them used to being comfortable and confident in the rider, so that if there is something that they're not familiar with it, they're confident that the rider is not going to take them in harm's way, and they're going to go ahead and go through it because they trust the rider. And that's what this is designed to do, designed to get the horses familiar with these obstacles, but also to give them trust in the rider.
The mounted unit will be used for patrol, crowd control, and other functions, and officers train for whatever situation might exist.
One of the techniques we use is called a diagonal move. If people are up against the wall and for some reason or another like to move away from the wall, it's very placid, it's very cooperative, and nothing more than lining the horses up and asking the people to please move from where they are to another position.
Move away from the wall. Come on, folks. Move away a little bit. Thank you. Thank you. Move away a little bit. Thank you.
A second technique that we use is just a line maneuver, and it's nothing more than ask people to kind of move back a little bit. For instance, if there's a special event and there's a crowd of people there as spectators, but you like them to get probably about maybe 5 or 10 feet back, you just line the horse up and just ask the people, could you please take a few steps back, and we'd like you to get away from whatever area we're at.
Just keep moving. Thank you. Keep moving. Okay, and we'll peel off to the right.
The last technique that we use is also a diagonal move. It's called a split diagonal, where you come from 2 areas, one from the left and one from the right. It's designed to get people away from the wall, giving them an avenue of exit that is moving strictly away from the wall. You have some people move away from the wall by doing your diagonal, then you go back into a line and just encourage people to move back.
Move along, folks. Thank you.
Spending time together is an important part of the training program.
Brushing them down is like someone giving you a back rub. So the horses feel very comfortable and they're very trusting in that. And also it does keep them, it keeps their coats clean, and for the hygiene of the animals, it's good to do that. So that's a daily thing that has to be done with the horses. Again, it's developing that trust between the rider and the horse.
Most of the officers who volunteered for this duty have past experience with horses. The patrol needs a special cop and a special horse.
It has to be an officer that's willing to put a lot of time into it and be willing to get the sore seat and some sore legs, because it's very physical work, and it is physically demanding. We look for a horse that's very calm. We look for a horse that's a little more mature, something in the age bracket of about 8 or 9 years old. By that time, they're over their teens, so to speak. They're into that more mature age, and they're probably more accepting of doing the training. We also look for horses that have very sturdy legs.
In order to keep those legs healthy for their police work, the horses wear special shoes with raised ridges to help their stability.
These shoes will last up to a year for this horse. They'll just have to be reset when the foot grows out. They'll trim the foot down and they'll reset the same shoe on. And this stuff is designed to keep them from slipping on concrete or asphalt or any type of paver block. Some surfaces they will slip to some extent, but he's got shoes like this all around. That's why we don't ask our horses to stop and pivot, because pivoting on this is like gluing your foot to the ground and asking you to turn. You could hurt a knee or an ankle.
The unit is funded primarily by private donations, mostly from Milwaukee Downtown, a business organization, and money seized by police in drug cases.
Well, I would say, yes, it is a good addition to police work. So all the major cities do employ a horse patrol. And I think, again, it's outstanding for public relations, but in addition to that, it's a very visible police presence. And I think that a city like ours that has a lot of activities in the lakefront, a lot of activities downtown, I think its visible presence would be a good addition to the town.
The Wisconsin Avenue Viaduct is pictured on this neighborhood's poster. This bridge and its predecessor have towered over one of the smallest and most isolated neighborhoods in the city for nearly 90 years. About 200 homes are here, mostly single family, many 100 years old. This one is home to the oldest resident of the neighborhood.
Well, I've been here 94 years. It'll be 95 in September. But what I remember is the dirty roads we had, and the kids would play, and all the neighbors would be sitting on their porch in the evening.
The first houses went up in the 1880s as job opportunities multiplied for the primarily Slav and German residents. It was known as Piggsville by the early 1900s, some say after a Mr. Pig, or pig iron production nearby. The most popular view attributes the name to a pig farmer on the valley floor.
And then Mr. Fry had a great big place over here, and there was all land, and he'd always plant corn and everything. And then he had pigs. So what I know is that they called it Piggsville because Mr. Fry had raised pigs down there.
And I used to love the stories that my uncle and cousins would tell me about seeing pigs floating, literally, when the river would overflow. Little pigs just floating down the river. I just thought that was...
that story.
You betcha.
Like her mother 20 years ago, Lisa heads the Valley Park Civic Association, which dates back over 100 years.
The first Valley Association was formed when this area was part of Wauwatosa, and they wanted sanitary sewers and they wanted paved roads, and they were darn well going to get it. So they formed their group and they stormed City Hall in Milwaukee, literally, and we were annexed by Milwaukee.
Before annexation in 1925, Piggsville was a semi-rural community. While more urban after that, it became isolated as people moved westward. Streetcars bypassed the valley on the Wells Street Viaduct beginning in 1892. The Wisconsin Avenue Viaduct was finished in 1911, adding to the isolation. An electric railway began service in 1925 along the current I-94 location. Though isolated, the community thrived with 4 grocery stores, several butcher shops, bakeries, and taverns. The Valley Inn is the only business establishment that remains. The residents who've stayed include many 3-generation families.
The neighbor lady across the street, her daughter lives across the street, and I live. My mother owns this house, I live upstairs, my grandson lives on 40th Street, so we're all just like one family.
It's like that with a lot of people here.
It is.
You lived here your whole life too?
Yes, 77 years. I always said when I got married, that's the first thing I'm going to do is move out of the valley. And I had a girlfriend, she says, the first thing I'm going to do, she says, I'm going to stay here. Well, she moved and I stayed.
Well, my folks didn't want to move. And, well, the young people always talk, let's move. We should get a room and move downtown somewhere. Well, that never materialized. So I start to work, and I stayed here.
The area that is now County Stadium's north parking lot was once a stone quarry, tempting kids who cut through it on the way to school.
And one morning, oh, there must have been about 6 of us, we crossed the tracks, got over to the stone quarry, and someone said, why doesn't somebody pull that switch? Well, nobody wanted to. They said, Mary, you pull it. I says, no, I don't want to, you pull it. And that's where it kept up. And it ended up, I pulled that switch, and all that crushed rock came out.
Mary also remembers going dancing downtown, carrying good shoes, leaving the old pair in a hole in the viaduct.
Yeah, it was muddy and dirty. We didn't want to go to the roof with dirty shoes. And we had a big rag. We stuck that in there, too, to wipe our shoes. Then we came home with we carried our good shoes home again.
The problem of Menomonee River flooding is as old as the neighborhood. This photo shows the aftermath of a flood in 1917. The perennial problem was evident in this picture 20 years later. Flooding hit the community hard in 1997 and 98, leading to a recently approved flood control plan.
Sewage District did a really good job, as did the city officials, and we are not going to have any net loss of homes. People are being relocated in the neighborhood. They're going to build this beautiful berm. Our neighborhood park, which is a county park, will expand to 3 acres, and it's a real plus for all of us.
The Valley Park neighborhood is not on the way to anywhere. It remains cut off by some imposing barriers. But its general absence of traffic, sense of identity, and relatively inexpensive housing make it attractive to its residents.
It's just such a nice feeling. You feel very secure and very comfortable, and it's just where you want to be if you're raising a family.
Call this neighborhood Valley Park. Call it Piggsville, spelled with 1 G or 2. It remains a distinctive and unique place.
When I was growing up, if a kid from another, I went to a Catholic school at St. Rose, if another kid said you lived in Piggsville, it was fighting words. And most likely you were having a little scuffle in the street. But now it's kind of a historic name.
Obviously you prefer one over the other.
The Valley, that's what it should be called.
Why?
Because I think it's much nice, sounds better. Piggsville, some people think I suppose we got nothing but pigs down here.
For a sleepy area, I'd say the people here are real tenacious to keep it stable. We've got probably a total of $14 million in improvements between the berm and what Marquette High School has done with Quad Park, which is on our eastern border. We're just really happy. We're working with DCD. It's good. Our property values are up. Hey, it's great. It's a nice place to be.